Hey everyone, it is episode 340 of This is Whole Life, and we are now in this is like going to be our third kind of movement within the podcast.
Okay, what were the first two?
Well, the first two was 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff.
15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff.
So that was just three of us, and then of course if there was a guest. And then it's been This is Whole Life.
Yeah.
Well, but it's been the three of us mainly.
Randy, Ken,
and
which doesn't
Jeff.
sound nearly as good as Randy, Andy, and Jeff.
And that's why I named
Ken,
it. Right, it just didn't flow. Andy, and it wasn't like they're like, well, why was Randy before? Why'd you put yourself before Jeff? I'm like, because it sounded better.
Yeah.
If it was Andy, Jeff, and Randy, it didn't work.
Yeah.
It has to end with the Jeff.
So now we're in our third iteration because we have a new person that we're adding to the podcast as a permanent, not a guest, a permanent part of our team here. So that's kind of exciting. So let me introduce to all of you listening, Melanie Bachman. Say hi, Melanie.
Yeah.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Yes. Is that where you key in the applause?
Yeah, no, I don't have it in the board, but we will find the applause meter because we know it would be gratuitous and it would be long, and we're just going to save time by putting a small one in there. How about that?
Fair enough.
So Melanie is going to be the new worship pastor for WholeLife Church, and she is doing a nice baton handoff with Richard Hickam. And somebody that Jeff knows, Tammy Sincamani.
She's really happy
to
have you taking
Jeff,
that baton.
Maybe we should have a long discussion about why Tammy is retiring at this point, but we'll save that for another podcast. So Tammy is retiring, and Richard is going to full-time employment in Advent Health. He really was full-time already. When you're a talented person, people find plenty of ways to use you, and Richard is just one of the most talented people out there. So, we went and found the best person we could find to fill those shoes, and turns out we found one person to fill both sets of shoes. Whether she's excited about that, I don't know or not. But Melanie Bachman comes to us from Nashville, but before that, I think you were out in Washington State.
Washington State.
And so I'll brag on you because I don't think you'll like to brag on yourself. Melanie has her master's degree from Fuller University. Currently working on completing her PhD from Vanderbilt University, and that's in homiletics and liturgy.
Yes.
And so I met Melanie for the first time when she came and sat on the second row from the front at Madison Campus Church when I was there. And after the service was over, I went up and greeted she and her husband. Her husband's name is Tim. And I was, saying hello, and I just, why are you here in Nashville? Well, we moved here. Okay, cool. What are you doing? Oh, I'm at Vanderbilt. Oh, cool. What are you studying there? Well, I'm studying theology. Okay, what kind of theology? Well, I'm homiletics. And I was like, oh, you're here judging my sermon, aren't you? How bad was it? So anyway, I knew after that I was going to need to get Melanie on my staff at some point. And I'm just thrilled that finally figured out a way to bring her here, and I think this church is just going to absolutely love Melanie, and her husband Tim is phenomenal. For those of you who like to play tennis, Tim likes to play tennis.
Yes,
I like to play
he would love
tennis.
Tennis partners.
There's other things that we can talk about too. That is just it's just.
And if you're one of our online viewers, you'll know him as Nashville Tim. Always good, always good questions, and we've answered a lot of those here on the podcast.
They've really been a part of our church for quite a while now. So anyway,
he's not allowed to ask questions.
I was just going to say,
he's been cut off now.
I was going to say his privileges probably have to be revoked.
Yes.
Now.
Oh no, I hope he keeps going. That'll be fun. Well, so anyway, so we're just delighted to have Melanie here, and I think it's just great to have a female voice here on the podcast. So I'm really thrilled that
I qualified, so here I am.
Yeah, congratulations. And it's also fun to have a PhD on the podcast now, or almost PhD.
We're almost. I'm not quite there.
Everybody we add, I just keep going lower down the pole. So I just, I'm really solidifying myself as host. So, but that's good. That's a good place to be. All right. So, anything you would like to tell anyone about Melanie?
Oh my. I wasn't prepared for that question. I was prepared for the theology questions, Randy. That's what I was prepared for.
We're going to get to them.
We're just really excited to be here. Actually, we started worshiping with WholeLife about 1.5 years ago. And this was our pandemic church. We watched church from the comfort of our living room, never knowing that we would actually move down here and get to be part of everybody in person. So here we are.
Like, you should feel like a little bit of a kinship to our production team. When we were filming church every week, nobody in the building except those participating. Yes. The children's Sabbath school, which everyone was like, that's my favorite part of church, by the way. They're like, we like the kids programs, which came first. And so, we were here every week doing that. And so it's nice to hear that there was actually somebody watching.
Yes. Nashville Tim and Melanie were watching.
Now there's a face to go with those views. Like, they were actually watching. Well, that was nice.
Yes. And I've been listening to your podcast too.
Have you?
So,
oh, wow. Yeah. And you still came on.
Well, I don't know. Actually, I came in, they blindfolded me, spun me around a few times. And then when the blindfold came off, I was in your studio in front of a microphone. So here we are.
You might not find your way back. You're across the hall.
I've seen her notes. She has some notes on things that need to happen in this podcast. So she'll talk to you next week about that.
All right. Well, hopefully when you talk to my wife about your office, I'm like, I live with you and my office, and there's another office getting stuff already. And
faster than yours?
I'm still here. And she said I got
you have the rooster. That's all you need.
That's all.
Yeah, we may be going. This may be the shortest reiteration. She may just change everything by next week.
Next week, we might all be. It's welcome to Melanie's show. The men have had their time.
Yes,
They've had their time. Years. All right. So this week we were into our second part of the Arise to Christmas, Arise to Unexpected Decisions. And I liked how, and I didn't see it on this week's, but in the, we keep Tammy has kept for years a sermon notes, like kind of the outline paragraph. And it was the Malingering Magi.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I had to look it up.
Did you?
I had to go to the dictionary.
I haven't, but Ellie was like, malingering? What does that mean? And I'm like, well, I think I know. I mean, there's lingering in there. So, I mean, malingering must be something similar, right? What was it, Ken? Or or should we ask the PhD?
I don't know.
It was actually Tammy was wanting a name for this wise man, and I said, well, let's use malingering. And I did not realize I did not realize that she didn't even. It actually is a term used for somebody who hesitates or just kind of pauses and procrastinates for something that is sort of made up or a. Sort of we might call it a neurotic excuse, so to speak.
Wow.
Well, you got to be a few of those things if you're going to travel, even if it was as short a distance as Ken brought up from Babylon on Camelback by 500 miles. I'm not sure that how many of us are ready for that.
Probably would have been malingering too.
Yeah, I think I'd have lingered for a lot longer, taking a few more pit stops. But if you missed the message, as always, please do go swipe up in today's show notes and you can find the link directly in Speaking of Grace, our sister podcast. And you don't want to miss a story about the Uno trip because to me, that was like now I have to.
Is that all you got out of the sermon this week, Randy?
No, but I have to.
But you're going to do it?
We're going to have to do it.
How's your family feel about that?
Oh, they're going to love it.
Okay.
We kind of do that anyway where we're just out. We'll just go for a ride someplace we don't know, which looks better, left or right. And then we'll let the girls call it out. And then,
see, all you have to do. So if you've already been doing that, it's just very easy. Then you just pack a suitcase and
it's done. But
so for those of you who maybe didn't listen to the sermon this week, basically my family did a random trip. We just got in the car on a Friday afternoon with suitcases, and then we used Uno cards. Whichever one of the children drew a card that was a higher number, we went in that direction that they were seated on, and so we wound up in Paducah, Kentucky.
Kathy, if you're listening, he was in your hometown. There you go. I know someone from Paducah.
Okay, there you go.
What happened when they drew a reverse card? Did you put the car in reverse?
Ooh.
We did a Yui.
Yeah, okay.
That's awesome. So did anyone else have a good story like Ken, like of traveling weird stories? How long did you plan the story before, or how long did you plan that trip? Like, when did you decide? It wasn't like Thursday night and it's like, let's grab a deck of Uno cards and pack the bags. Let's go.
I think it might have been Friday morning.
Was it really?
Yeah, I really think it was pretty random. I think I'd had the idea from a while back, but but it just hit me that morning. We've got a long weekend. Let's just do this. And
we did that one time. We put I told the kids that we had a touch screen on the kind of the navigation and just touched a space on the map. And you couldn't go too far because the map had a circumference of about 40 miles. And then we just put a dot on there, and then the car just took us there, which was kind of cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Closest I came was Green Bay to Hagerstown, Maryland from a Friday at 5 p.m. and back home by Sunday at 10 p.m. for a wedding.
Wow.
We got there, we slept, we got up, we went to the wedding, and we drove home. And time for me to get 3 hours of sleep for Monday morning at 7 a.m.
Wow.
Closest to, but we only had short notice, so we didn't really have time to plan it. It was just, you guys going to come to our wedding? Sure. Let's do it.
Let me guess, you had no kids at that point.
No, not married. Not married, no kids. This was long ago. Yeah. Any good ones?
Well, we went on some crazy trips when I was younger because my dad used to like to do that. He would purposely get us lost. And then we would find our way home. And he also, I'm going to tell on him now, he also didn't think that no trespassing signs applied to us. And
they don't. There's little disclaimers under the bottom.
Disclaimers on the bottom,
yes.
If
you look tight.
Rod may enter. Yeah, so we actually ended up on a mountain one time in the middle of winter, and the road was closed, and we got stuck up there. And just fortunately, this snowplow just happened to be coming through and plowed us out. So yeah, that one was for you, Dad.
I always tell my kids when it says road closed, and I'm like, if you look under the sign, it says except for 2006 Ford Freestyles. You can.
Well, that's true because yours isn't all-wheel drive, is it?
No, but if ours dies there, we'll just bury it there, take the legs off it, and it stays because it's ready to go.
You can walk out.
All right, let's get back to the Magi. Some of the things that I thought that you at least hypothesized that maybe they came from Babylon, and I found that to be very interesting. In the fact that they'd already been in captivity there, so maybe they had some ideas about this. But then I'm thinking to myself, but who? I mean, was it just the nature of their culture that they would have been curious? Like we have these people who we obviously probably think we're better than because we conquered them, we captured them. They've been here for a couple hundred years. What would be the thing that would push you out the door to say, I think we should go check out this star?
Well, by that point, Babylon had been conquered also, so they weren't exactly the apex of power in the world. So, like I said, that was just me hypothesizing. I'd be curious what a Vanderbilt almost PhD. I'd be curious what her hypotheses would be on that.
Can I just specify? I majored in homiletics and liturgics, not New Testament. However,
do you want to? I hope you know, Melanie, that doesn't matter a bit to me. And that we'll be using this all the time.
Yeah.
So what was the question again?
So the question is, where do you feel like the Magi might have come from? So my hypothesis was Babylon.
Yeah, I actually would agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. They would have had those documents probably for a long time, and they had people who were very interested in culture and very interested in learning about other religions. So yeah, definitely.
I thought it was also cool that when you brought Daniel into it, like he would have been one of these learned people that would have been referenced in the same way. And I don't know, anytime you can put a reference to something else that you think you know a little bit about, it seems to bridge the gap a little bit and make the story a little bit more comfortable, maybe.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you read Daniel, I think it was Daniel 1, and you see what Daniel was trained in. It was exactly what these guys were trained in. And so for me, that's always been a little bit of a fascinating thing that I think that we don't cover very often in sermons and in our talks because it's a little bit uncomfortable. But Daniel was trained in a lot of things that good Jewish people might have had a little bit of an issue on. Yeah, because he was trained on reading the stars. That's part of the learning that he was given in Babylon. Now, what he makes plain, if you read Daniel chapter 2, is that it's God that gives wisdom, and so he gives the credit to God, not his ability to read stars and do things like that. But it doesn't change the fact that they educated him with a Babylonian education, which wasn't exactly a Christian education, or a Jewish education in that case. So, like I said, I think sometimes that can feel a little uncomfortable because we like to kind of put things in compartmentalize and say, oh, but I think it goes to, and this is a little bit of a tangent. But I do think it goes to something to the fact that Daniel, I believe, had good parents who raised him to have a core understanding of who God was, and so when he got out into a quote unquote worldly situation, into a situation where he was being taught things that were probably very different than the things he'd been taught growing up. He knew how to hang on to the values that mattered and to do the right thing. And so, little plug for parents, you really are the power. It's not just sending them to Sabbath school at WholeLife or just sending them off to a Seventh-day Adventist school. You are the biggest influence in your children's life, and you really can make the ultimate difference in their knowledge of God. And that's why it's so important for you to be able to share your values, to be able to share the things that you believe with your kids.
Yeah, for sure. Herod.
That's next week.
Herod is next week.
That's this upcoming one. You notice I didn't go too far down that road because I've got to. This is going to be the fun part of the Christmas story, isn't it? Because I'm going to this next week when I have to talk about Herod.
Well, just that you kind of peeled the skin back just a little bit to give us a peek.
Just a little bit.
At a little bit of the.
It's going to go a lot further next week. This guy was pretty wicked, man.
A little bit of the craziness that he was, but I also look at him and I go, how many times have we seen, maybe not to the same degree, but people that are just so set in whatever power they have or whatever theology or even worse, whatever methodology that they use, that this is the end. And it just like to no degree will we not go to make sure that this is somehow protected or it's at least known that this is the right way that you should be doing things. And whoever you can pull in, it doesn't even matter at this point, but whoever you can pull into your side. And I thought that was just an interesting sidebar. I know we weren't going to go too deep into it just because that's next week, but the fact that, you're taking out family members, that's, part of that faith journey for the Magi. I'm sure they understood pretty quickly how crazy Herod had to be when they met him. Or do you think he was a little bit more slick than that?
You know what? I think in that time and place, they were probably pretty accustomed to
crazy kings.
And they did have if they were from Babylon, they'd heard, if nothing else, they'd heard about Nebuchadnezzar, who wasn't exactly. and I think in our own Western modern sensibilities, we don't begin to grasp the way, and particularly America with the value system that we have with presidents, we really don't grasp what a king is capable of, and so for them, they would have, because they'd be used to that. So I think that they were used to working with people like Herod on a pretty regular basis. And so, when you're new to town, you don't know the king super well. You may have heard some stories, but you don't know him well. You're maybe speaking a second language when you're communicating with them. I think there might have probably been some communication with Herod if these were I'm assuming these were fairly prominent people. We're talking about the Roman Empire here. So they probably came from another Roman leader who somehow gave them documentation. I don't know. But to just travel into another country and be able to get an audience with the king of that country
had to be somebody fairly
seems
important.
Like they would have had to have some
I didn't think of that.
Important documentation with them, I'm assuming. I don't know. They probably had a pretty good entourage of people with them. Otherwise, they're just going to get robbed.
There was only 3, Jeff.
Yeah. We know the road to Jericho was a pretty.
If you're traveling with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, there's a pretty good chance you've got some people guarding that stuff. You have your Secret Service with you.
If they were Magi, they were probably like Jedi Magi, weren't they? Do you need an entourage then?
Well, they also. Apparently, they had the star to follow. So
that's right. Yeah. I think they were fine. All I know is there were 3 really cool ornate candle holders in our end table that was my job to set up every Christmas with the candles, and there was only 3. That's all I can tell you. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night either. So what do you think might be like current day? Like the Magi, God uses them kind of as a wake-up call. The people that are supposed to have been studying and know what they're looking for, and the Messiah. And
well, first of all, we don't know there were 3. It never gives us that number.
We've passed 3 now, Jeff. We're done.
Yeah, okay.
3's done. Okay.
Well, you said 3, so.
Just trying to help you out.
I know.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you there.
So, what is something that you think could be today that maybe Adventists hold on to, or another denomination, or Christianity as a group, as a whole, holds on to, where maybe someone else has, maybe there's some Magi out there that go, I'm not sure that I'm buying all this? Anything you can see that might be a modern day equivalent to where we're at right now? Because it'd be nice to, if anyone was just like, I've really been thinking about, maybe this is something the same that we
I think it could be anybody who has a different belief set or religion, or religious system. I mean, that's really, I appreciated the amazing drama that that Tammy wrote, and then that was acted out by Craig. And Craig came up, and I just really appreciate. He came up to me the previous week and was trying to get some information about the sermon, and he said, "Well, he kind of asked the same question you did." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you were going to be looking at somebody, I would say that you could. I mean, it would be a little bit of the equivalent, maybe in Christianity and Seventh-day Adventism, of some Muslims coming up and being like, 'Hey guys, Jesus Christ is coming back, and we've got some information on it.' And we'd be like, 'Oh yeah, okay, thank you for that.' How could you, as a Muslim, be able to share anything with us as Christians?" And I think that, and so I really appreciate Craig kind of grabbed a hold of that, and kind of ran with that with the drama that if you didn't see it, go watch it. It was really good. But I think that's the thing. It's interesting that God will use who God wants to use. And in this particular case, he used people from a different belief system.
Ken, you had a story that I thought was pretty apropos, and you asked about how does this look like in modern day. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had Connect 2022. And we had a clinic that was actually, it's run by the Islamic, I think it's run by Muslims. Is that correct?
It is.
Muslim,
And they came, took part, and we all co-opted together because we had a common goal. And I think they looked at that and they said, this is something we want to be a part of. And we looked at them and they said, we want them to be a part of this as well. So there is this, I think, a very good cooperative effort to go for a goal that both of us had strong feelings about wanting to accomplish. And somebody actually went into that clinic and...
Yeah, and I won't go too far because I don't have the person's permission to share it, but we just, I was made aware by a person this week that they, one of our unsheltered friends who went to that clinic was referred to a specialist, and that specialist caught something that was life-threatening, and that person felt like had they not had that clinic, had they not come to Connect 2022, that the health problem that they had might have killed them. And so, to Jeff's point, God used us, but he also used some really amazing Muslim doctors to help.
Another really awesome story coming out of Connected.
Isn't it? It's incredible. To me, it was such a great event in the first place, but just knowing that this potentially wasn't just a great event, but it potentially saved somebody's life, it took it to a different level for me.
But I think it's a coming together of different types of...
In the smaller pieces where, Ken had a coming together with that person. I know I had a coming together with Edwin that I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and other people that saw and met people there that they've run into again. And it just seems like the Holy Spirit is planting these seeds that when like you said, we came together and just decided that we can all do this together, and obviously for the better, because I think we can see that in the results. One of the things, almost ready for questions here, one of the things I thought about is a lot of new Christians, or maybe even more so Christians that have been damaged by the church. They hear stories of like the Christmas story, and it's like, well, that's one I'm pretty solid on, right? There's 3 magi. There's, we have the story that gets told in dramas when we're little kids, in plays and things like that. And then you read the Bible story out of a book, not necessarily out of scripture. And then you read the scripture. But then by that point, by the time you're old enough, maybe to get past the milk and get to the meat, your mind already knows the story. So it kind of fills in the blanks to what you already think you know. Those three magi, they hold on tight. They don't want to let go. Then I think about the people that hear a message like what they heard this week, and you're presented with all kinds of new things. And sometimes it makes me question what I think or what I believe. And I think it can be frustrating because I've been that other person where it's like, well, great. I just, now I'm even more confused than I was before. And I'm not really sure what to do with that. What do you say about like when we're considering that God is going to use different people and the stories maybe it could be a little bit different than what we thought. And that can be unsettling. It's still the best story ever told, right? It's still about the birth of Jesus, and now we're just waiting for the second advent. But what do you say to someone who is just a little bit going like, man, Christmas is my strong point, like that and Easter. I had those ones down, and now I'm feeling like maybe the stories are a little bit different, and maybe there's some deeper meaning, and maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough as a Christian or mature enough yet to understand all this. Where does it leave that person?
Well, I think I'll just speak up.
You go.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that the important thing is your connection with God. Because we're always going to be encountered with things that challenge that. We're always going to be encountered with knowledge that may challenge the deep-seated things that we have believed. There are some scholars that believe that there were no magi. They believe that they kind of zoom out and they look at the book of Matthew, which was written much later in the probably 60s or so, 60 years after it took place. And what they suggest is that you have to zoom out and think about what Matthew was trying to accomplish. Here they were, second generation, and a lot of people have died. The people who actually had seen Jesus with their own eyes had died. And so Matthew writes this book for a waiting church. And so there were people who were there who were thinking, wait a minute, is this really going to happen? He said he was coming back quickly, and he's not here yet. So Matthew writes this book to these waiting Christians, and he uses these kinds of stories, like the story of the Magi, to say, remember, this was important. Remember, this mattered. And the truth of the story may not necessarily be in the details of the story. The truth in the story may be the significance that Matthew was trying to share. So, I mean, for me personally, it doesn't matter if there were 3 or 5 or, what gifts they brought or how many camels or even honestly, if they didn't come at all, that doesn't change my belief in Jesus.
Keeping the faith in Jesus first, letting the details be what they be.
Yeah, I'm a bad one to ask the question that you asked too, because like my favorite thing in a sermon or a book or whatever is to be surprised. I love it when I'm like, oh, I never saw that before, and there it is. Yeah. And you might kind of get that impression from the way I preach. I love to look at things from a different angle. I love to come at it in a different way. So if there are people who are thrown off kilter by that, I apologize. I know some of us just like to let's just hear the story the way that I heard it 20 years ago. That's not the way my brain works. I'm like, surprise me. Give me something I hadn't thought about. But I think to Melanie's point, it really does come down to that faith in Jesus and not letting the details throw you off. Okay. And just saying, you know what, 2, 3, 10, or 0. And to Melanie's point, it was really important to Matthew. I happen, by the way, just as the disclaimer, I happen to believe that they actually did show up. That's what I believe. But there's no doubt that Matthew is going way out of his way to point out that Jesus is fulfilling some prophecies by people from the East and the West. You notice that I pointed out the Roman soldier from the West. Right. He's really, his book is very intentional. If you think about writing somebody's somebody's biography, there's so much information you can include. And I know that sometimes when we look at the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we think that that's a lot of reading. It's not. It's a very short story. But all of those cases, there's not a long read if you really stop and think about it. And so these guys wrote a very accessible And they wrote it intentionally. They wanted to make a point. They were trying to point some things out. And Matthew really cares about his Jewish audience. He really wants them to understand that Jesus was the forecasted Messiah. And so there's a text in the Old Testament that says that kings from the east and the west will come to the glory of your rising. And so Matthew is with the wise men. Matthew's using that story, which again I believe is true, but that's why there's some theologians say, Matthew's just adding that in here just to make the point. But he's making the point. He wants his readers to go, yeah, this was the Messiah. This was the guy that was supposed to show up. Yep, we're in the right place. And the foreshadowing with the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gold was there to help financially. The frankincense is that it's for deity. So Matthew's readers all understood that intuitively, the same way that if I said, hey, let's go to McDonald's, you would understand what was on the menu intuitively. I wouldn't have to go, well, they have some really good French fries, and you might want to get a big. I don't have to explain any of that. You understand all of that. And so when Matthew says that they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh, his listeners automatically understand what he's trying to say with that. Oh, okay, yeah. So, he's bringing gold for a king, he's bringing the frankincense for a deity, and then this myrrh, well, wait a minute, somebody's going to die here eventually, which is going to lead to something later on. And so there's no doubt to me that there's just an incredible amount of genius that goes into the writing of each one of the Gospels. And Matthew is, and I love the way that The Chosen, if you haven't watched it, you should. It's called The Chosen. I love the way that The Chosen portrays Matthew, because very meticulous, very, cares about the details. And that is who Matthew was. Matthew cared about those details. And again, Melanie will tell you that people argue whether it was actually Matthew that wrote it, but but I believe he did, so we're going to go with it. So,
no. Anyone gone to the theater yet to see the first
Not
two episodes?
Yet. No.
Okay, no spoilers. Sorry, not going to do it to you.
Don't do it.
Man, Matthew. Anyway, something to look forward to. You should go, by the way, because it's worth every penny to see it on the big screen. Let's get to the questions, because I think we answered everything else I had thought about up to this point. Okay. Deanna wants to know, it's humbling to think how many moving parts had to come together for this event to happen. Did everyone, when impressed by God, follow their impression? And are we following our impressions from God? The last one, I guess we can all answer for ourselves, whether we are or whether we aren't.
Well, my knee-jerk reaction was to say, well, we can't know, but then I think we do know. Not everybody did follow their impressions, I don't think. I think when you see the religious establishment in Jerusalem not going investigating for themselves, I happen to believe that, my belief system is that God would have put it on their heart to go do that, and that they would have had to purposefully decide, you know what, no, I don't think I want to do that. So that's the way I would view it. So the truth is, you probably can't know, but from my perspective, yeah, I think that there were people who obviously didn't follow their instincts. I think there probably was a malingering wise man out there who didn't want to take a 500-mile camel ride.
He made it 250 and said, forget it.
Yeah. Well, there's some that could have just, gone across a few miles, to check it out. But yeah, they didn't.
Well, we don't really know actually how many people the angel appeared to. I mean, there
Right.
could be some that missed their opportunity to be in the book of Matthew because they didn't respond.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Hope not.
Bummer.
Hope not.
And maybe Matthew was being nice and just not naming names of people who didn't.
Let's not make this about the wall of shame, right? All right, Trifina. Always Trifina. Thank you.
Yeah, we love it, Trifina. Thank you for always being involved.
Yeah. She says, Ken, let's transcend to Orlando 2022. There must be a time warp. I gotta get some more noises on here.
We're almost done with 2022.
I know. The star was so bright and significant. How do we know practically today which star or sign to follow from God?
I think for me, it comes down to learning to hear God's voice. And that is just one of the things that I'm most passionate about in life, is helping people figure that out. Because I think that there are a lot of stars out there. And I think that unless you have learned how to tune into God's voice, it can be very hard to know which way to go and what to do. And so for me, a lot of that comes from Bible study. I think through my time in the Bible, I start hearing God's voice as it's been written. I think another way that I do it is through my friends that I feel like are connected with God. And when I check in with them and ask what they're seeing, if you really, the Bible tells us that the wounds of a friend are faithful. And the truth is that if friends know you really well, your spouse knows you really well. If you want the truth, they can tell it to you if you're willing to handle it. For me, I have a hard time handling it myself, but yet you need it if you really want to know, because we all have these big blind spots in our life that whether we're carrying prejudice with us or whether we're carrying that we just don't realize it. Everybody else around us realizes it, but we don't realize it. And so that's another one.
If you look at the stars for 10 minutes, nothing makes any difference at all because you don't see anything in 10 minutes. If you look at the stars and you line them up and you do it for 2 or 3 hours, all of a sudden things change right before your eyes. I think that's part of how, her question's a very good question. A lot of people have said, I pray, but nothing seems to work. Yeah. And, I pray or I try to do this. And I'm not saying that you're not doing it long enough. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that we disregard meditation and taking time on a consistent basis because we are so impatient and we want things to be happening right away. And it might be more of a trajectory of how you look at these things as opposed to just having that said or, this, I'm going to point to a place on the map and I'm going to go there. But I do think that it's important that we realize that God is not just in that moment, he's also in the waiting. So we get a chance to see things over time. And I think it's important that we see this star that they had been studying maybe for years. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. But the study of stars and astronomy and all of those things, it's amazing to me the patience that it took to learn that.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Jamila asks, given that as Jesus started his ministry, even his disciples misunderstood his mission, them thinking overthrowing the Romans, it seems like a stretch to suggest that Herod was willing to kill God. I think his pattern and history supports that he was looking to, air quotes, off the competition. One and the same? Not?
I have no problem with somebody disagreeing with me. Although you're going to have to disagree for a second week in a row because next week when I talk about
good point.
Next week when we talk about it, the reason and by the way, this is the first time I really saw this, but if you look in Matthew chapter 2, where the story is found, Matthew puts into Herod's mouth. So if Herod said this, he says, "Where is the Messiah going to be born?" So he uses the word Messiah. He doesn't say, where is the King of the Jews going to be born? He says, where is the Messiah going to be born? You have to remember that Herod was very familiar with Jewish religion. Even though he was only half Jewish, he was very, very, very competent when it came to Jewish theology. And so it wasn't like a throwaway word that he used when he said, where's the Messiah supposed to be born? And so my gentle response is, I really do think that Herod had zero problem taking out the Jewish Messiah if it meant him keeping power. Because he said, where's the Messiah going to be born? And then as we're going to talk about this next week, what does he do when the wise men don't come back? He goes ahead and he kills all the babies in Bethlehem, according to the Matthew story, which, by the way, is an interesting thing because that there is nowhere else in history. Josephus doesn't mention it. It feels like something Josephus would have mentioned. It's the only place where this is mentioned. Again, Matthew loves to go ahead and use going back to the Old Testament. He quotes an Old Testament book there that the voice was heard wailing in Ramah. And so there's some, we'll talk more about it next week. There's some things going on there. With that said, it seems to me, and if you just go ahead and take a time to read the biography of Herod, after you read that biography, if you have a hard time thinking he would have a hard time killing God, I don't know. The guy was pretty okay with keeping power in whichever way he thought he could. So anyway, so
we'll check out part 2. So Jamila, if that didn't answer your question, send another question in next week after you hear next week's sermon.
but again, Jamila, there's one of the things I love about theology is there's plenty of room to disagree.
Yeah.
And I'm plenty comfortable with you disagreeing with that. That's no problem at all.
All right, we're going to save the last one because it's tough. So I'm sorry, Melanie.
So you're looking at Melanie. So
yeah,
so you're going to send a tough question that way.
We have
Perfect.
to. I mean, one actually had your name in it. So
yeah, you had to look at me for that one.
Why do I feel like a hazing is about to happen?
I
don't know.
Maybe.
Hazing
So
question.
this is from Anonymous, lowercase spelled correctly, because we have a lot of different Anonymous.
This isn't from Tim in Nashville?
No, well, it doesn't say so.
You never know.
You never
Okay.
know. Well, you tell me. Maybe it is. You might have you'd be like, No. How does one strengthen their faith?
Well, it's a really huge question.
It is.
And there are
It is
lots
a tough-
of really
I mean,
great answers.
it seems simple,
Jesus
but it's
is the
tough.
author and finisher of our faith. We can pray for more faith. We can but for me personally, there's no such thing as faith that hasn't been challenged. If you have a belief that hasn't been challenged, then that is a belief. It's not faith. Faith has to have that sort of dark side of the moon element to it. So if someone recognizes that they want their faith to be strengthened, or they feel like their faith is not strong enough, that's a great start.
Okay.
That's
Look
a
for
great
those
start.
spots where you've already kind of gotten smacked around a little bit and go, yeah, that might be
Well, and
part of the process.
don't be discouraged, because I think it's something that develops over time and over relationship. And I also think that there's an element in the fact that God is big enough to fill in the gaps of our faith. So if we don't have enough, or we feel like we don't have enough, we're still safe.
Still safe.
Still safe.
See, I was gonna go there with a question of my own, and then I realized there was one in there. But I was just gonna say, usually, for me, and I wouldn't suggest it. It's usually trial and error. Poke the bear, and then after you get smacked around, you're like, whoa, what was I thinking?
I don't know. You have a different definition of faith. Right?
Yeah, it was. So definitely go with.
Whoa.
I'm going to go with the. I'm going to go with the other one.
Yeah, I would too. That's why I asked you, because we obviously needed a better answer than Lorraine. That was clear before it was written. So one of our whole life reflections asked this week, who do you write off as not having any religious wisdom and or relationship with God? And I thought that maybe write off was maybe a bit harsh, maybe a little velvet sledgehammer there. But who do you to me, I thought of it as, who do I look at and think, I don't think they know what they're talking about.
Come on, Randy. There's nobody you write off. I write off. There's people I write off.
No, I mean, I just want... So many people,
which I don't want, but I do.
No, I know. I think we all do to some degree, whether it's a total conscious effort or not. But when faced with actual, even if I don't like somebody, like we don't gel, we don't mesh, we just need to be in opposite corners or not in the same room at all. So many people over my life have called me out or surprised me by saying something that you're just like, did you read that somewhere? And not giving them credit, but then realizing that everybody has a talent in some way, some strong point, something that they're rooted in, just like we are with our talents. I don't get as offended as I used to, or I'm not as black and white as I grew up to be or I was taught to be. And that's been a long road, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying that I don't ever do it, because I'm sure I do. But it was more cautionary as to what are the little things. Maybe we don't just write people off, but we just kind of, oh, that was cute. That was nice. Oh, that was warm and fuzzy. Or instead of just really taking what someone is giving you a genuine answer to something that you might be missing, just like the religious leaders. And I mean, the Magi came to it and they're like, there's no way they could have anything to do with this, or they would have any knowledge or something that we didn't understand. I think that's where the slippery slope of us just assuming we know everything. So maybe not always a write-off, but just the little sneaky ones that we don't realize are there. That's kind of how I took it. All right. Next week, we've already discussed, right? Unexpected challenges. Herod had challenges. Didn't he just eliminate challenges? I put my thumb on you.
Maybe Jesus had the challenge, or his parents had the challenge of
doggone it,
avoiding Herod, huh?
See, I didn't think Ken had it in him, and then there he just surprised me, so there I did it. Sorry. Should have known. So you survived episode 340, which is episode number 1 for you.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And we'll see if Ken lets me come back next week. This might have been my permanent position for one episode.
I think you're back next week. Wondering if we're going to be back next
week.
I know, right?
Just Randy and Melanie.
Man, that means we need new theme music again. Talk on it. We're going to have to totally redo this. Ken, at the end of his message, had something, just a short couple sentences that I thought really were something that we should think about this week. We would be foolish to think that we are somehow intellectually superior or morally superior to the Jewish leaders and the Jewish people in Jesus' time, because human nature is human nature. God has prepared a table for many to sit at. There will be people at the table that will shock you. And are you on a faith journey with Jesus that will allow you to be at that table that's been prepared for you? Do you want to be at the table? Do you want to be on a faith journey? Faith involves action always. What about you? Are you open to Jesus leading you? And that's a lot of questions, but there's also a lot of reward in there too for those questions. And just stopping to think about, as everything now, we're past Thanksgiving, we're on the fast trip to Christmas and everything that involves, whether you like it or not, that's the new trajectory. But maybe just to stop and think about that one this week would do us all a little good as we head into Christmas. So anything else? We'll see you all again next week. Thanks for listening.